Hi, everybody. It's Susan here with a look at Jupiter moving into Gemini. And I'm quite excited about this one because I have Jupiter in Gemini natally. I also have Jupiter in Gemini squaring Saturn in Pisces, as some of you will if you're born in 65 or 66. And we'll have a look at that later on. This video is mostly about our individual lives and the sign-by-sign forecast, so that's coming in a moment. I just want to set up the context for Jupiter in Gemini, and also to say that each time there is an ingress, each time a planet moves into another sign, the overall context is very different. So the flavor will be unique each time, although there will be a resonance, of course, there's a similarity. So Jupiter is there for a year, and while it's in Gemini, it's also ruling Saturn. And this we haven't seen for 58 years. So we are getting something of a different flavor of a Jupiter at this time, and equally a different flavor of a Saturn this time. So if you go back into my Saturn video, from a couple of years ago now, about a year and a half ago, I did Saturn in Pisces for all the signs, and I explained how it's answering to Jupiter all the time that it's in Pisces. And so now Jupiter is ruling from Gemini, which itself is ruled by Mercury. And this is one of the reasons why Jupiter in Gemini is known for being a little bit erratic or chaotic or extremely focused on details and data and facts. It's also able to see both sides of a situation. And so there's an open-mindedness of Jupiter in Gemini that we don't get from the Jupiter-ruled Sagittarius across the way. So Jupiter is considered to be in its detriment when it's in Gemini, because it rules Sagittarius. And so what that means is that when it's in its own sign, it's more likely to be steady and have this sense of already knowing, or in a higher manifestation, in the most ideal manifestation of Jupiter and Sagittarius, it's really about wisdom. It's Jupiter does represent wisdom, but Sagittarian wisdom is about what you might describe as divine law and divine or natural law, understanding of universal principles. But this can also boil down to dogma and spiritual or religious dogma that might seek to impose its opinion. And so there can be this side of the Sagittarian energy, which Jupiter in Gemini stirs up because of that Mercury influence, which is kind of available to other opinions. It's more available to how other people see things. And so people with Jupiter in Gemini tend to be quite open-minded, and there tends to be an ability to see that there is a reason for things happening, and we can look to find the evidence for that reason. So Mercury, and especially when Jupiter is in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, it's going to ask questions like how, why, where, when, who, and all of those questions are going to inform the wisdom of Jupiter. And so it can get distracted and it can seem a bit chaotic, but it's because it understands from the Jupiterian perspective of taking a big picture view that there's a lot of details to put together. Mercury is all about these kinds of details and information, and Jupiter pulls things together when it's ruled by Mercury in Gemini, and therefore it can also represent things like explaining the bigger picture, but in a way that every person can understand. Translating concepts like philosophical concepts, which is the Sagittarian thing, or religious or spiritual concepts, but in a way that people can actually make practical. Gemini is very practical. It's very hands-on as well. And so Jupiter in Gemini is extremely good with practical things. It's never going to sit with a problem. It's going to figure out how to deal with the problem. And so there's this focus on growth. There's a growth mindset, a feeling of moving forward, and a feeling of enthusiasm for learning as well. So as Sagittarius and Gemini are the axis of learning and teaching, Jupiter and Gemini also makes excellent teachers and students. The challenge is this distraction. The challenge is dispersion and wanting to do it all the time, and being just not having enough hours in the day to get all the things done. Lots of plans, lots of ideas, difficult to manifest. So Gemini is an air sign. It's all about communication, but it doesn't have the grounding necessary. So this depends on the chart. It depends on the natal expression of this, but it needs a bit of grounding. So when we have Saturn in Jupiter ruled Pisces at the same time that Jupiter is in Gemini, we actually do get quite a lot of grounding in terms of our spiritual side. So notice that both Pisces and Sagittarius are ruled by Jupiter, and both of their opposite signs are ruled by Mercury. So Pisces is opposed by Virgo, where Mercury is not only exalted, but also the ruler. And then, of course, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, where the opposite sign is Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. And so there is this complicity between Jupiter and Mercury, always. It's always about trying to understand the concepts, the bigger picture, or the mystical, or the more spiritual aspects of life, the more philosophical aspects of life, higher-minded aspects of life that Jupiter represents, and then filtering them down through the mercurial lens. Now, with Saturn in Pisces, we have more structure. So this is actually quite helpful. And you'll see when we look into the Saturn squaring Jupiter, that it can actually be a source of support for the Jupiter in Gemini, which wants to go in every single direction. We do have that Saturn in a square a couple of times. The first time will be the 19th of August, when Saturn is squaring at 17 degrees, I think. Let me double check that. Yeah, 17 degrees, both Pisces and Gemini. And then again, Christmas Eve, so Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, depending on how you look at it and where you live, 24th or 25th of December. And so we're having these squares from different perspectives. Then we get another square later on when Jupiter enters into Cancer, and then Saturn enters into Aries. So that'll be 2025. We'll leave that where it is, because otherwise the Jupiter in Gemini will get way off track and we'll just go flying into next year before this year's even happened. So if we look at the square, I'll just touch briefly on that. We can see that the grounding capability of Saturn in Pisces, which allows us to try and create a framework for what we believe in terms of our spiritual faith, in terms of our understanding of what is life, in fact, what is this world, what does it mean to be alive. This is going to bring some grounding to the Jupiter in Gemini, which wants to really try and get into the nitty-gritty every day. This can be in a material sense, for those of us trying to, say, do a project. It can feel like an obstacle. It can feel like you're being pushed to defend your project, or try and justify things, or you might have to rework things. You get to a certain point and then you have to go back and figure it out. Or you might come up against some kind of what feels like a block or an obstacle or a reality check, where it comes to all these ideas that are coming thick and fast. And Saturn in Pisces says, you know what, you're just going to have to choose. You've got to narrow this down, and could you just finish what you start? And that's the Jupiter in Gemini, which is so busy, it doesn't want to finish what it starts, because it just has so many ideas. It always makes me think of Dory from Nemo, where she's just like, oh, turtles. And it's kind of like turtles everywhere. So anyway, so this is what we've got. We are already living in this air type of energy. So collectively, we're living in this age of air. And Jupiter and Gemini is going to, of course, add to that. But never mind. That square that's coming up both in August and again in late December is an opportunity to correct what we're doing. And the first time it's going to happen with Saturn retrograde and Jupiter direct. The second time that it happens, it's going to be with Jupiter retrograde and Saturn direct. So it'll each time have a different flavor. And I'll cover that in the future in different videos. So Jupiter in Gemini loves a good gab. It's a very social energy. It talks to just about anybody. It's not, it has no sense of a political or spiritual agenda because it wants to learn. It's more curious about what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? As opposed to Sagittarian Jupiter, which says, here's what you should think. Here's what you should think. This is what I think. And so that Sagittarian quality can be that sort of dogmatic or even missionary zeal that is that pontificates. It can hold on to beliefs and push those beliefs in one shape or one way, shape, or form. If you have strong Sagittarius in your chart, you might notice that at times that you really you find that you're really attached to your beliefs, and you really do have a sense that everybody else should sense that. Now, if you have Jupiter and Gemini, you might have a sense that you are very open to how other people live their lives, and that whatever religion or sexuality or opinion they hold is just theirs, and it's something that can be discussed. It's about debating and not about being right. And Sagittarius is much more about trying to find what is right in terms of an absolute. Now, these are characterizations. That's not going to describe necessarily individuals. It's the archetype that we're dealing with here. So when we look at issues of natural law, a divine law, if you want to call it that, in terms of Jupiter, or wisdom and spirituality and religion, understanding, trying to understand this world, trying to understand what it means to be alive, what it means to be human, these Sagittarian and these Piscean qualities that we're channeling through Jupiter. Whatever kind of gratitude or abundance, that's part of the expression of Jupiter. And then again, we're looking at a quality of Gemini, which is very much about the everyday. It's about the sharing of things. It's about the exchange of ideas. It's about the communication and local space, as opposed to, say, national space or a vast theoretical space. Gemini is extremely hands-on, and so there is this almost compulsion for teaching, and I share it. I'm afraid that's just one of my foibles. And so whatever circumstance you find yourself in, if you do have this natally, Jupiter and Gemini is going to help people understand something, and you will turn every moment into a teachable moment. And that is part of the growth mindset of the Jupiter in Gemini. Now, again, there can be this dispersion. And because of this desire for knowledge and a desire to understand the facts, it can just become overwhelming as well. Too much information, too many facts, too much detail. But at the same time, and this is part of the quality that allows for the open-mindedness. And so I'm really hoping in the year ahead that many people will be able to manifest this open-mindedness that is curious, as opposed to dogmatic. The Jupiter, when it was ruled by Venus, had a lot of fixed energy behind it, because Venus was retrograde in Leo, you'll remember, last year, 2023. And so when the ruler of Jupiter goes retrograde in the sign, whatever quality of that sign, it's going to carry some of that energy into Jupiter. Now, notice that we also we've got this Jupiter now ruled by Mercury, which changes signs frequently and is retrograde at least a third of the time. And this is one of the ways that we can see the difference between say, Jupiter in fixed sign of Taurus and Jupiter in the mutable sign of Gemini. And so mutability is a very strong keyword for both Jupiter and Mercury. It's about adaptability and change. And so, in fact, we are going to find much more capacity to talk to each other, I do believe, and that's my fervent hope at the very least, in a way that is much more based on what is information coming from a place of truth, as opposed to what we already feel in our heart to be true, which is the Jupiter in Taurus. It's like, my values tell me this, and therefore it must be true. Whereas Jupiter in Gemini is saying, actually, I just need to know. Can we just check that? Can we double check those dates? Can we double check those figures? Did that really happen? And so the questioning is going to actually be supported by the Saturn in Pisces, because that's going to be grounding especially around the times of the squares, which can, again, like put a check, let's say, on the maybe fast-paced change in terms of public opinion, or in terms of where we're going in terms of interrelational issues, communication, and so on. I do think that we're going to be in a phase, in a time of increasing propaganda, of increasing you know, misinformation, or whatever that means, you know, what people describe as misinformation, much of it which is true. And we need to stay in that vigilant sort of Jupiter Gemini quality, which says, I'm actually looking for the facts. So please just tell me the facts, and don't tell me how to feel about this. Gemini is not too bothered about feeling. It's not emotional at all. It's it's an intellectual sign, and it's understanding things from the basis of intellect. Mercury doesn't care about emotions. It's just like, well, what is this? What's this all about? Let's expose it. And one way to know that you're being propagandized, and by the way, it's not that the bad guys only do the propaganda. If wherever you're sitting, your country is doing it too. Some more artfully than others, and some more subtly than others, but we are all being propagandized. And one way that you know that you're not living in the truth, but living in propaganda, is that you're becoming very emotionally attached to whatever the belief is that you're holding. And if you're feeling your emotions triggered, if you're feeling yourself unable to see the other side, then you know that you're not living through your own opinion. You're living through what you're being told to think. And so Jupiter in Gemini is an opportunity to shake off other people's ideas of what you should think, and really start to cultivate your own thinking for yourself. It's a vital life skill. It's very, very important. And it is indeed a most important way of living together in community. Gemini rules the natural third house, and it's all about community. How can we be together in harmony in this community? And when Jupiter moves into that space, it's really, the big focus is that, how can we just get along? Can we just share nicely and stop throwing our toys at each other? So this is a big part of the next year ahead, as we get into the rest of this year and into the first half of 2025. One thing that I wanted to point out as well, just have to double check my notes because I have to write everything down. When you have Jupiter and Gemini, you have to write everything down because there's so much that comes through the mind. It's that censorship is the other side of this. So propaganda and censorship, that was it. And so the aspects of Jupiter that we want to be careful of is the belief that we're getting enough information and getting it from appropriate sources. Now, this is always a problem. Let's say back in the day, let's imagine around the time I was born in the 60s, newspapers were the gatekeepers of information. And so it was very, for example, if I take the Jupiter in Gemini, which was in 65, 66, which was incidentally the last time we had the Jupiter in Gemini squaring Saturn in Pisces, which is why I hold it in my natal chart. You're told by each independent sort of newspaper, whichever the newspaper or the television station that you might watch, you're told what was going on in the world. Now, those gatekeepers were always influenced by the government, and there's always been influence in that way. It's never been truly independent media. It doesn't last very long in these environments, unfortunately. But nowadays, we have the internet. And before, let's say when Jupiter was, when Pluto was in Sagittarius, we had a kind of a glorious period of especially in the early days, when the internet was very open and free. The World Wide Web was about expanding knowledge to all kinds of people and breaking down these barriers to who had the truth, who was the bearer of truth. And so we got all kinds of open discussions and open forums on the internet. People could actually look up all sorts of information. Now, since we have had Pluto going through Capricorn, that has really shut down. Now with Pluto in Aquarius, which is also about social control and about the reestablishment of social norms and social connections, we're having to really grapple with this issue of gatekeeping and who has access to knowledge. So it's no longer newspapers, which are pretty quickly dying off, but it's about who channels the search engines. And so we have a couple of very limited suppliers of search engines. And if you go, especially with the main one, Google, you will not get what is actually real. You'll get what the government wants you to hear. And this is very important because one of the things about Gemini is to know what to ask, to know which questions to ask. It's not just knowing to ask the questions, but it's trying to understand until you get to the right answer. And so let's just use the example of a search engine. You get the first page and you'll get, say, the top 4 or 5 hits of what Google wants you to know. Now, keep in mind that Google is part of the infrastructure of the government, US government, and the military industrial complex. And so you're going to get information that's based on what they want you to know. You'll have to go into about page 20 of information before you actually get anywhere near things that they really don't want you to know. And even then, you may not get access through Google. Even if you use the actual title of what you're looking for, you may not get access to what you want to know, and you might need to go to a smaller search engine. So you might need to go off to a less overwhelming censored platform. Now, we have to keep these things in mind in modern times, especially because I do believe over time that this, one of the signatures of the Pluto in sextile to Neptune, which we do have for a big century or more than a century, is really about propaganda. This is the dawning of this big age of propaganda throughout all of the 20th and into the 21st century. And so it's a background story to everything that we're experiencing here. So bear that in mind. As Jupiter goes through Gemini, you're going to get a lot of information, but keep asking questions. So why is this happening? And things don't happen in a vacuum. There's no good guy and bad guy. There's always some nuance in every story. And Jupiter and Gemini wants to know why. So don't stop at the first why. Keep asking. So let me see what else I want to show you. Oh yeah, the dates. Maybe before I jump into the actual chart, I just want to pull up some dates so we can go back a little bit in time. So obviously from this particular time, it's the 26th of May until the 9th of June, or the 10th if you're in Europe and Eurasia and Australasia. And we can find that going back to mid-2012 till mid-2013. And then again from June 2000 till June 2001. Remember, that was when it was opposite Pluto, so a much more intense version of this. And so we want to keep in mind that these events will look very different each time. So many factors changing. And then again, before that, it was mid-1988 until mid-1989, mid-76 till mid-77, and then spring 65 until the spring of 66, the spring of 53 until the spring of 54, and the spring of 41 till the spring of 42. What's interesting about that is they're sharing the same dates as what we are right now, which is that the Jupiter entered into Gemini on the 26th of May of 41, and it exited Gemini on the 9th of June in 1942. I thought that was really interesting. Just a little aside, because I don't think it has specific significance in terms of what we're experiencing today. Just thought it was one of those interesting little repeated cycles. So again, bear in mind, if those are dates that you were born in, that will be where you have Jupiter in Gemini. In some cases, it did overlap with other signs and go retrograde outside of the sign, so it may not be entirely true for everyone. This time around, it doesn't retrograde out of its sign. It stays within Gemini the whole time, just as it did in Taurus, by the way. So Jupiter in Gemini represents this communication ability, this intellectual curiosity that I mentioned, this idea of being able to talk to anyone and being able to express ideas, being quite articulate and persuasive in the way that they speak and share information. That can also be deceptive in the sense that Gemini can also be, through the Mercury quality, the trickster. And so that Mercury quality can be sharing something, but with a twist. And so you never really know. That's why I'm saying again, beware of propaganda, beware of what people are saying. Take it on board only after you've realized this is your experience. It's not that you are being told that it's true, that it becomes true. You want to really question your beliefs in this time, really sit down with what you believe. This is always important, especially as a spiritual practice. Really question your beliefs. Don't fall for new age ideas of, everything is going to be great and we're all flying off planet or whatever the thing is, and it's all going to be fine. You want to keep this really practical. Jupiter in Gemini is a very practical way of living your life and understanding what is going on in life. And it doesn't mean it's any less spiritual. It just means that it needs to be in your everyday life. You bring that spiritual quality and the quality of wisdom into your everyday life. So because it's a mutable sign, and again, because of the Mercury influence, it's highly adaptable as well. The Jupiter and Gemini energy is very adaptable. This is also why I feel a little more optimistic about how we might be able to engage in communication and some kind of compromise or some kind of resolution to many of the challenges that the world is facing right now. They won't look like the world that we used to know. Nor should they, because clearly that's not working. And so things are going to be changing quite dramatically. And this will, in particular, if we use the example of the United States, which has this in the house of relationships and open enemies or whatever you might want to call that, other people, there will be a massive focus on that. And that can include even internally in the United States. And we're seeing that. So you've noticed that the Jupiter Gemini periods are also connecting very strongly with issues of standing up to situations that are intolerable. So it's like people power, if you like, and especially with regards to students, we see in the last few decades where things have come up in a way that is coming through the institutes of knowledge and students, and expressing what needs to be said in a way that is grassroots. And so I think we're going to hear a lot more if we're allowed to hear it. If you get beyond those gatekeepers, you're going to hear a lot more from grassroots movements of how things can look going forward. And we definitely need this in this era of Pluto going through Aquarius, where we need to change the way that we're relating to each other socially. How our society is organized needs to be transformed. So Jupiter in Gemini is extremely optimistic. That's part of this, why I think this can be a better opportunity for us to improve our situation. It is a growth mindset, as I mentioned. It's something that says, look, we might be in a crappy situation, but let's make the most of this and learn from it. And learning is the key word here. I'd like you all to keep that in mind as well as you go through the next year. It's like, what can I learn from this Gemini area of my life? How can I use this as an opportunity to increase my understanding of myself or my life or whatever the particular placement is? And so really trying to understand things from a place of neutral, fact-based, ideally, understanding that comes from the Jupiterian place of wisdom, meaning that there's a bigger picture here. And especially as we've got Saturn ruled by Jupiter in Pisces, we need to clarify what that bigger picture is while we're looking for how we're going to make this work every day. The Jupiter in Gemini also is about social engagement. And so, like I said, the grassroots stuff is really important. We need to find new ways of connecting with each other in ways that we can support one another from a place of higher wisdom, what is useful and helpful. It can also be about networking, and this we'll see in each individual chart how this might show up, but it's definitely important to think in terms of connecting with each other, networking, and extending into friendship groups or social groups of some kind, and and to enjoy life through that real life connection, not just device-based connection, but actually in real life. The third house is not just about communication on your phone, but also communication in your neighborhood. Walk around, go and use the facilities that you have in your neighborhood. Go to local spaces, parks, and cafes and things, and be there, be communicating with people in a tangible way. And then it's also a restless sign. So there can be this feeling of always wanting to go to the next thing and the next thing. And that's what brings about this dispersion, this potential for wasting energy and not using the energy well in terms of focusing. So that is also where we're helped by the Saturn. And we'll see how it pans out in each individual chart, because that'll feel different for each of you. But to be able to really ground yourself in something and stick with it, it's not going to be so easy. Of course, that's a challenge for all air signs in general, but it's definitely something that we need to keep in mind, because we could end up kind of wasting time or wasting a little bit of our what we might consider the blessing of the Gemini house, and then missing a chance because we're doing too many things at once, for example. If we look directly at the ingress chart, we see that Jupiter, you can ignore the ascendant. This happens to be an ascendant in Capricorn for Greenwich or UTC. The moon, unfortunately, is not in strong dignity. It is in the sign of its detriment in Capricorn. But we do have Mars and Venus, Mars is in strong dignity. We've got Venus and Mercury in what's called a mutual exchange. Venus was in good dignity up until the time that Jupiter moved into Gemini. Now, Jupiter is moving into Gemini with Venus and the Sun, which can be extremely, really lovely quality, a lovely energy, but it also can be too much of a good thing. The Sun dominates all the planets that it's with. It's considered to be, it burns the planets, if you like, or it's overwhelming in some way the quality of the planets. Now, we just had the Sun and Jupiter reborn on the 23rd of May. And at that time, which is a beautiful cycle, it's a rebirth of the Sun coming into, rebirth of Jupiter, rather, coming into the heart of the Sun. It's a whole new year, a whole new cycle of a year between the Sun and Jupiter, and that's a really beautiful new cycle, but it does weaken Jupiter to a certain extent. And all of the month of May, essentially, and into the first 3 or 4 days of June, Jupiter is very, very close to the Sun, which means that it's not necessarily going to give us the best results. And so we're still kind of trailing some of the challenging aspects that we had over April, well, even let's go back to March, April, May, where there were some challenging aspects when we're not quite out of the woods yet. But just as Jupiter leaves the beams of the Sun, it goes into this incredibly beautiful, helpful, supportive, empowering, uplifting, and dynamic trine to Pluto. So remember back in 2020, 2021, when I was saying that Jupiter was in Gemini in opposition to Pluto, and we're no longer in that dynamic of tension. Now we're in this dynamic of support. Well, at least in the very beginning of the ingress, Jupiter is in a trine. Now, it's at the very least a sign-based trine, which is really helpful, and that's going to be sustained for the whole year. But initially, it's in an exact trine in the beginning of June. So this is a good time to launch things. That is really from the first week of June into the middle of June. That is an excellent time. And I think the exact is on the 7th of June. I've forgotten exactly now when. I forgot to check that, sorry. But we'll have a look in a future video to make more specific details available. But so keep that in mind. This is a really lovely entry into Gemini, along with Venus, along with the Sun. It's kind of like Venus is kind of saying, hey, you know what I learned, and I want to share this with you, and I want everybody to understand the values that we've understood now over the last month. I want people to really reflect on this and share that and talk about it and have a new vision for that in a new way. So Venus and Jupiter have just created a new cycle themselves. So just after Jupiter and the Sun met. Then 2 days later, Venus and the Jupiter met, creating their own new cycle, and they bring that energy of Venus from Taurus into Gemini. Well, Mercury itself is in Venus's sign, and so we're still looking at issues to do with the Taurian part of our chart. That still is part of this story, because the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which was very impactful around the 20th or 21st of April, really all through April, is informing what you're doing still with Jupiter. It's like a new boost, a new start in so many ways. And so you want to think of Jupiter as being in many ways recharged to get into Gemini. And again, that's one of the reasons why I'm so optimistic about this transit, because I do think it can be very supportive. Just before Jupiter moves into Gemini, it's in an exact sextile to Neptune, and that's also very harmonious. It's in a separating sextile, not even a half a degree away as it's moving into Gemini. So that's also extremely helpful. It does offer a feeling of compassion and optimism, and gives us an opportunity to use the Neptune at the end of Pisces, hopefully not from a place of delusion or disappointment, because that's another thing that Neptune can bring, especially at the very last degree of Pisces. It can just be like, oh my God, this is too much, I can't do it. Saturn in Pisces also can bring us this feeling of, this is way too much, it's too hard, I can't do it. Jupiter and Uranus and in Mercury ruled Gemini will help us to uplift those qualities of both the Neptune and the Saturn and get them back on track if there is any feeling of overwhelm from a place of this is impossible. And with that in mind, I want to say the last time when in the 80s, when Jupiter was in Gemini, I was in university from 85 till 90. I did my degree in international relations. I was always very much my focus on international politics and what was going on around the world. And in those days, we were already working to work on issues around Palestine. It's not a new issue. But most especially in those days, it was about the South African apartheid, and we were working very hard, manually signing letters, actually in some cases manually writing letters. But people would type out and then print out letters. We would sign them, write the envelope, send them off to all different people concerned, including businesses and government officials, to ask them to divest from South Africa. And that started to really pick up momentum when Jupiter was in Gemini. We're seeing this happening again. It was very much a multi-country, multi-layered approach to trying to get countries to divest and interests, banks, governments, etc., to divest from South Africa, to choke South Africa into compliance, let's say, with what the rest of the world felt was a bare minimum of fairness. And so this is something I want to remind people. If you're feeling any despair around the situation in our world right now, where it feels like the situation can never change, that quality of the 88 to 89 and Jupiter in Gemini also, by the way, brought about quite a lot of interaction between the West and the Eastern Bloc countries of the former Soviet Union, or at the time the Soviet Union, and in the form of Reagan and Gorbachev, who were speaking regularly in discussions about how to cooperate, how to change. And it was based on this Jupiter Gemini phase that the subsequent change was possible, as the Berlin Wall symbolized in November 1989, when it came down and Gorbachev allowed everything to happen in the way that it did, creating this whole new wave that felt like it was impossible before that. Tiananmen Square happened in May of 1989. And again, it was unspeakable. We couldn't even imagine that this would happen. Now, that was repressed very quickly. That didn't work out in the same way. But it's definitely worth keeping these things in mind. What seems intransigent, what seems absolutely impossible at one moment, is suddenly becomes possible, and then it opens up a new perspective, Gemini, to a higher minded vision, Jupiter, for life. So I just want to put that out there. So if you feel these are hard times, if you're really struggling with that, just bear that in mind. There's just this one snowflake that makes the whole avalanche happen, and there's just that one drop of water that makes the cup run over, and that's the quality that we're in right now, the quality of the year ahead. So that's another perhaps way of looking at Gemini, is the power of the individual, the power of connection through understanding, through talking, through not yelling at each other, but talking from a place of trying to understand, try to learn. And so even reframing how you speak to one another, and how you might even post a comment in the YouTube section, rather than making it sound like an accusation, try to turn it into a legitimate question where you're not condemning, you're not coming from this place of insulting or whatever the thing is that you're trying to express, but come from a place of really genuinely wanting to know. And that's the beauty of that Jupiter quality in Gemini. What else do I need to say about this? Yeah, we've got Mars also approaching Chiron just at the time that Jupiter is moving in. So that's a very interesting thing, because Chiron, Mars is at the degree of the eclipse, which will be a degree that again and again and again is going to be highlighted. We are really going to have to look out for that 19 degree of Aries, where it's going to be triggered, even including by square. So 19 degrees of all the cardinal signs. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. That will always trigger that eclipse point, which has been extremely powerful and continues to be powerful for a couple of years to come. And so Mars is right there at this point. And so keep in mind that Mars is, of course, the planet of action. It's in its own sign. It's very dynamic. It only just moved away from Rahu, the North Node. It's still in the orb of conjunction, within 5 degrees of conjunction of the North Node. So just moving out of that conjunction and moving into Chiron, just almost 2 degrees away. So in a couple of days after Jupiter moves in, the Mars Chiron will be exact. And there we are really going to start to see opportunities to take action based on what we need to repair, what we need to understand about how we're messing things up for our own well-being, how we are sabotaging ourselves collectively and individually, and especially, again, wherever Aries is. So you'll see there are lots of videos that I've done, that other people have done, that you can find out more about that Aries eclipse and understand the meaning for yourself personally. So this is an interesting add-on in terms of the Jupiter ingressing the Gemini right now, where we can maybe find more capacity to talk about things that need to be spoken about, need to be understood, need to, at the very least, be reflected upon. So let's have a look sign by sign, how all this is going to take shape. And of course, we're going to start with Aries. And so for Aries, we're looking at the, I hope you can see this. Let me just double check that you are seeing what I think you're seeing. No, you're not. I have to just change this for a second. Hang on. I want to share this one. That's it. There we go. Sorry about that. There's Aries. And I wanted you to see this because it gives you an idea of the quality of the sign that you're looking at right now. And so for Aries, we're looking at, and by the way, I'm doing this for each house that is representing especially the ascendant, but it's also going to be for the sun and the moon. So you can think of this in terms of how you might, feel if it's the moon, how you might respond internally, how you might respond in terms of your home and family. Where if it's the sun, this can be about your career, this can be around your sense of your purpose. And of course, if it's the ascendant in Aries, this is really going to reflect all of life. It's going to reflect all the different ways that your life is influenced by the sign-based reading. It's probably the most accurate, or the most, let's say, direct way of understanding the transit. So of course for you then, because you have a natural chart, Aries is the natural first house, and so you have Gemini on the third house. And that means that as Jupiter has been, for example, in the second house for the year before, and that's where it met up with Jupiter met up with Uranus. It's now got this fresh new start and a lot of inspiration around your values and around your perhaps your money and income story and your family and what was going on around family. And now you're pulling that into your third house of communication and connection. This can also have something to do with siblings. It might be with reference to your day-to-day interaction with people or with your extended family, or it can be in terms of skills that you want to learn. And maybe you're realizing something about the income that you're earning, or the money that you have set aside, or any kind of things that you own, not necessarily property, because it's more like movable objects, things that you own of value. And now you're realizing that you need to think differently about this, or you need to act differently about this. And you're pulling that into the third house, where you might need to reorganize yourself in terms of skills to maintain that, or how you need to connect with family to maintain those family connections, for example. So there's a year now where you've got Jupiter in the third house. It's going to be a busy, busy year because, and this is one of the reasons that Aries is anyway known as quite a very dynamic and busy sign, because you've got Gemini on the third. So there's a lot of interacting, a lot of communication, a lot of running around in your daily life. It's kind of your standard. Now with Jupiter there, there's going to be even more of it. And if you're coming across a sense of overwhelm, you really want to pull into that Saturn, which is in your 12th house, so that you can recognize that you still do need to reflect and pull back a little bit. Saturn in the 12th is about reorganizing what you might not understand about what is driving you. Let's say Saturn in the 12th can be all about recognizing patterns of the unconscious mind. This can be something to do with foreign lands. And if you work in some kind of trade or a business or communication or online stuff, especially now with Pluto moving into your 11th house of networks and your future, your vision for the future, you will do really well to organize new contacts from abroad, or new ways of working with people from abroad. Well, Jupiter is in the third house. It doesn't have to only be foreigners. It also works really well if your teaching is something related to spiritual things, if your teaching is part of this high-minded way of looking at life, if it's about yoga, spirituality, or philosophy, or some more high-minded pursuit that you might be teaching. This will do really, really well for you. You'll bring in an enormous amount of opportunities and new connections through that third house. It's also fantastic for writing, because Jupiter going through the third house is it's just brilliant. And then soon after, just a couple of weeks after, Mercury is going to go into your third house. And so if you are in the planning stages of writing, or if you're working through some project, this whole year will be just fantastic for you. And that might even be part of the Pluto in your 11th house, which is taking you in a new direction in terms of your future. And your vision for the life that you have, or that you want. Saturn in the 12th, also with Neptune there in the 12th, can be also an opportunity for you to realize, to do the writing or to do the project that I want to do, I need to pull back a little bit. And there you might just realize you need to socially disconnect for a little bit. Although with the Jupiter in the third, I think that's going to be really tricky. But at the same time, you just use that square energy from Saturn to Jupiter. That is, that says slow down, slow your roll, and just pull yourself indoors at your desk and focus on the thing, so that you can come out of the Jupiter third house with a product, with something that you might want to actually present to the world. Now, this doesn't have to be a book. It can be a course that you might be working on, putting something out there that's going to serve a practical interest and be a part of communicating what you feel it's important to communicate. Now, all of what I'm saying really does depend quite a lot on the Jupiter, the quality of Jupiter in your natal chart, that we can only see from a natal chart. And bear that in mind, because Jupiter will give you the results that you are able to get from the quality of your natal chart originally. It's not Santa Claus. So one thing to bear in mind is that with Saturn and Neptune in the 12th house, there can be a tendency to go off in a place of wishful thinking or not wanting to take responsibility. Saturn will create problems if you do that, if you try and check out and get distracted with minutia with Jupiter in the 3rd house. You'll miss opportunities. And so do keep yourself in check so that you can really take advantage of the Jupiter in the 3rd. It's a brilliant opportunity for you to get to know the people around you, get to know people in your life, and to also to travel to all kinds of different places, because you have Jupiter ruling your 12th house and your 9th house. It's in your 3rd house. All of those represent travel, particularly the 12th and the 9th. It's faraway lands, travel for a purpose in the 9th house, like pilgrimages or conferences and this kind of thing. And so Jupiter moving into your 3rd house can have you traveling quite a bit, and that would bring you some fantastic opportunities, especially with that Pluto going through your 11th house, where you're changing your connection to networks and people that you meet, changing your everyday friendships, and working in a way that's going to bring in some new stuff. Jupiter is also with Venus, which is ruling your south node in the 7th. So changing up friends and relationships has been part of the program, let's say, since the middle of July of 2023, and it continues right through the middle of January of 2025. So this is part of the story. It's making new friends. Go out there and make new friends, Aries. With Mars in your 1st house, you'll feel very dynamic, and with the Mars conjunct the Chiron, you might also realize where it is that you might need to modify your approach, how you approach people, how you use anger. Do you use anger in a way that is constructive and assertive, self-assertive, or is it aggressive and therefore divisive? So one thing to leave you with there. And so make the most of the Jupiter in the 3rd house. It's a great place to earn money. You've had the Jupiter in the 2nd, but that can also reflect also having a lot of expenses, not just earning. The money is the focus, not necessarily just raining down on you. And again, that depends on your natal chart. So good luck with that, Aries, and I will see you in the next video. And now Taurus, we have Jupiter in your 2nd house. So it's been in your 1st house all this time. And Jupiter in the 1st house has been a real blessing for so many of you. It feels very comfortable. It feels like a brand new cycle of self and a new way of seeing yourself. And that's where we had the Jupiter and Uranus together. So there was just this real dynamism around new beginnings, a new way of showing up. And especially as the eclipses were in the 12th house for you, there would have been an enormous amount of change around issues of your what is behind the eyes, let's say, your unconscious processes, or perhaps ancestral issues as well. Something to do with things that you are unaware of, or that you are becoming aware of. And now you, with the Jupiter in the 1st house, you become aware perhaps of things that you are capable of. And now as Jupiter moves into your 2nd house, that's going to impinge on your sense of self-worth, bringing you a great sense of self-worth. So it has been a good year, and it will be a good year ahead with Jupiter in Gemini. Now, again, as I said to the Aries, be careful, because Jupiter in the 2nd house can mean that there's a lot of expenses as well as earnings. So it is, of course, in its detriment in Gemini. So it's not always going to bring about the best opportunity for earnings. It means that there will be a lot of activity around that. But you have Pluto in your 10th house that's changing your social status, your social structure, or the way that you show up in the world. And that's not only career, that's really how you engage with the world outside of you. And with Jupiter going through the 2nd house, that might be, again, a boost for you, that you really feel like you have more confidence to do that, or more means with which to do that and to expand into something. Saturn is going through your 11th house, ruled by the Jupiter in your 2nd. So there is a lot of stuff around money. The 11th house is the house of gains. And with Saturn there, it's not necessarily easy because the gains are hard won. They are, you're working for whatever that is, or you're really having to sort that out and organize it. Saturn does pay off, but it does require a certain amount of effort. And I love Frank Clifford's way of speaking about that, which is that Saturn doesn't always give you what you work for, but you work for everything you get. I love that because it describes especially Saturn in the 11th house. So when Jupiter is in the second house, don't have this idea that it's going to be raining down cash or that it's all going to be happy days financially. There is a lot of focus on money, and your ruler Venus is right there with Jupiter as well as the sun. And so she's a little bit burnt by the sun. She's still under the beams of the sun for a while. But the sun will clear out pretty soon, and so you'll still be able to get a lot of the benefit of the Venus with Jupiter, which is extremely helpful because Jupiter itself is ruled by Mercury, which is in your sign. And so you are getting quite a lot of support in terms of how you feel and how you're working based on your own self-worth, based on what you need to feel supported by. That can also include family and how you might need to reconnect or connect differently with family. And so, yeah, the second house is also an area of how you are engaging in terms of your maintenance of your income or your possessions. And with Jupiter in Gemini, there may be a desire for changing around that. You might realize, actually, I need to sell a few things, or I'm really ready to invest in certain things. I'm just ready to make something let's say update what it is that I need to do. And that's going to come really at an opportune time for you, because with Pluto going into your 10th house, there is this big change of status that's coming up. So this can work in your favor. It can be very supportive. With Saturn ruling your 10th house, the gains that you earn from the second house and how you manage your money, how you take care of your money, will also be supporting your career as well. So because Saturn is working through both the 10th and the 11th house. And then also Jupiter itself rules your 8th house of other people's money. And so it might be that you become more important in terms of being the breadwinner, or that you yourself find that you have to support people, let's say your life partner, or that you're just not getting as much from other people as you're getting from your own effort. And so it is a time right now to focus on what you can do, what you can bring to the table. It's the most important thing right now. And then next year in January 2025, you're going to have the North Node moving into that house of gains. So you're going to see a lot of how that pays off for you in 2025, because then you'll have Jupiter in the second house with the North Node in the 11th house, pulling in a lot more, let's say, positive energy around issues of gains. And for 2024, focus instead on where you might need to realize that you're not helping yourself. There might be issues that you need to take care of in terms of, being your own worst enemy, or having people who are not really supporting you, that you're not so clear how they're showing up in your life, but you need to change that. You need to overcome some way of not working in your best interest, or whether that be with certain individuals, and that can be in the day-to-day where the South Node is in your 6th house, or with colleagues or employees who are not really working towards your best interest. That can be a part of this bigger story as well. All right, Taurus, make the most of this. I hope you have a wonderful opportunity through that second house with Jupiter there. And so Gemini, of course, this is all about you. This is your first house of self, and this is pulling in beautiful energy of Venus as well as the sun. So you are really feeling magnified at this time. Your ruler, Mercury, is in the 12th house, and luckily it's making a beautiful mutual, what's called a mutual exchange with Venus in your first house. So it's not as difficult as otherwise that could be, but Mercury in the 12th house might have you a little bit confused around certain things, or not entirely clear on which steps to take. just wait, just hang in there. This is anyway, when Jupiter's too close to the sun, it's not a great time to really jump in and launch. It's a good time to really reflect and think about what this new cycle of Jupiter and the sun means for you. And you're still, your ruler still is going to be meeting Uranus before it even gets into your first house. And so that's going to be until probably the middle of June before you really start to feel that things are coming together for you. But nonetheless, it's an ingress chart, so it's going to express a good year ahead. It's giving you a trine to Pluto. Jupiter is trining from your house of self into the ninth house of luck and good fortune in terms of your especially higher vision for life. What do you feel your purpose is? Pluto is up there changing that for the next 20 years, changing how you believe, what you have faith in, how you might connect to your ultimate sense of purpose. And Jupiter in the first house gives you real confidence in terms of saying, yeah, I think I know now what it is I need to do. Jupiter rules your 10th house of career and your social networks, or let's say your social ambition, not the networks, but the ambition, your career ambition as well, your life goals in that sense. And also Jupiter, of course, rules your house of partnership and your life partner or business partners. And so it pulls a lot of interest in from you into that seventh house as well. So this might be an opportunity for you to really shine in relationship, and to really feel that you're bringing something to the table, that you might find that you're actually contributing more at this time than your partner is, or that you're contributing so much that you're attracting new partners. This is one way that can look. It can also, again, depend on the natal Jupiter, because the seventh house will depend on the quality of your Jupiter. Same thing with your career. It depends on the quality of your Jupiter in the natal chart. So this is just a general way of looking at it. Every possibility is dependent on the natal chart. And again, this is for the sun, moon, and rising sign, but especially for the ascendant. So the rising sign or ascendant is where we'll get this really specifically. If it's your sun, then it's going to speak a lot more to your career or your sense of purpose. And if it's the moon, it speaks much more to how you feel, or maybe where you live, and how you connect emotionally or psychologically to your life. And so Saturn is in your 10th house as well, ruled by that Jupiter. So there's a lot of effort that you can put in to really improve your career. You might find, or career, or social participation, social status in one or another way. And you might find that there's actually quite a lot going on that you are able to withstand, because with Jupiter in your first house, you just feel like you have more capacity. And that's really helpful. With Saturn in the 10th, you can become an authority figure. You can become someone who actually really plays an important role, a Saturnian kind of role out in the world. That can also be with regards to family, for example, because Saturn is opposite the fourth house, and your chart ruler is ruling your fourth house, Virgo. And so there can be something that is about establishing a family or connecting in a different way with your family, including your lineage, but also a family that you're establishing. So changing your social status can also mean either getting married or getting divorced or having children, or like children fleeing the nest, as it were. All of that is possible, again, based on the natal chart. So for Gemini, Jupiter going through the first house is the other potential is that you might find yourself overindulging, because you also have this trine to the fifth, trine to the ninth. There may be some overindulgence in terms of living the good life and not really paying attention to the details. So just be careful of that. That's always a problem, but especially when Jupiter is not in strong dignity. So you might find that you just overdo it. And overdoing it can be in any kind of way, particularly because you have Uranus in the 12th house. There may be some issues around self-undoing, or an instability around anything that might touch on addiction, or self-defeating behaviors, or qualities of relationship that are creating some issues. You've had quite a lot of challenging energy in your 11th house of friends and networks. And so just keep that in mind, that North Node is still there in your 11th house through the rest of 2024, and pulling a lot of attention in there. And Mars itself is going to be squaring that 11th house from your second house of values, and then your third house of friends as well. So later on this year. So just to keep that in mind, that you want to keep it reasonable. Don't overdo it. Don't overpromise. That can be one of the things with the Jupiter in Gemini, especially for a Gemini rising. Again, it depends on your natal Mercury. In this case, Mercury is in the 12th house, where things are not necessarily very clear, and we may be a little over optimistic or overshooting the mark, or just confused around the details. And then so this is a time where you would do well to wait and not overpromise. So when Saturn is squaring Jupiter, it's going to be doing that from your 10th house into your first house. So there's something that you're doing that would be in August, the 19th of August, or in the 24th, 25th of December time, where something that you're doing is impinging on your status or your career, and that might require a way of showing up in a different way. So you personally might need to change, especially if that's your ascendant or your rising sign. So that's going to be in operation in a sign-based square all of this year. And that's for all of us, but for you, it's very personal because these are angular houses, and that makes it extremely powerful. Right. I think that's it for Gemini. Have a wonderful, bright new year ahead, because that in your own sign, Jupiter always brings beautiful things, lots of opportunities. And one last thing to say is that just because Jupiter moves into your sign, and especially bearing in mind that Jupiter is not in strong dignity in Gemini, doesn't mean that only good things are going to happen to you. Our relationship to Jupiter is really what dictates that. And so keep in mind that part of the quality of Jupiter depends on how you use that. If you find that you're not getting the results that you want, it's because you might be sitting around and expecting them and you're not taking action. One of the ways that you can enhance your Jupiter in general, and especially when it's in your first sign, first house, and especially when it's not in strong dignity, is to donate. And so show gratitude in sincere ways, donating to, for example, educational institutions, or your teachers, or your spiritual guides, or your church or synagogue or mosque, or whatever place of worship you might have that is important to you. Support other people who are doing Jupiterian work, and that supports you. Support children as well. Support people who need food. Jupiter is all about those things. And so if you're finding you're not getting these results, don't sit around and say, oh, nothing happened to me. This is not, life doesn't happen to you, it's happening through you. And Jupiter is not Santa Claus, so don't get confused. Use the energy of Jupiter, but don't expect gifts if you're not meeting Jupiter at least halfway. So, but make the most of it. Have a wonderful year ahead, Gemini, and I'll see you in the next video. So Cancer, this Jupiter is moving into your 12th house. That's the house of endings. It's the house of faraway lands and faraway places. It's pulling in foreigners and philosophies from foreign lands, or it can be around issues of confinement, which can be something to do with whether it be illness or retreating based on wanting to study, or based on spiritual practice. This is the place of monasteries, for example, and ashrams as well. It's also prisons. So, Jupiter is not necessarily only bringing good things. It depends on what you've been doing up until now, and also what how you're operating in your day-to-day life, and how Jupiter operates in your natal chart. So the best use of the Jupiter through the 12th is to pull in that Saturn that it's ruling. That's Jupiter rules your 9th house, and bring in some deep spiritual practice, a deep longing for the truth, maybe working with ancestors, working with spirit guides, working with people who are bringing you a vision for life, let's say, from a higher perspective. Saturn in the 9th carries a very strong signature of working in this way with a new set of beliefs or a new way of understanding what you believe. It's a process. So Saturn is there until February 2026, and that's where Jupiter continues to rule Saturn while it's up there in your ninth house until February 2026. And so there is a lot that you can develop, but in the beginning, there can be a loss of faith. Jupiter in the 12th can have you feeling that you're doubting, you lose faith, you lose a sense of what you thought was real or you thought you could believe in. And Saturn in the ninth is also doubting, maybe doubting the leaders or doubting the people around you. It's about testing. It's about asking the right questions and finding the right people to ask and getting good advice, finding good quality teachers. Now, with Jupiter in the 12th and Saturn in the ninth, Jupiter ruling that Saturn, you will get some really good advisors. You'll get some good help. You've got Pluto moving through the eighth house. That is the house of secrets and the unconscious mind. It's about where, and 12th house is similar, by the way. So it's very much about what we don't really know, what we're not fully aware of. And that includes the spiritual or mystical realms. And Pluto is moving into the eighth house, which shares that kind of magical or mystical quality that can also be psychologically deceptive. It can also refer back to family trauma. And so with the Jupiter in the 12th now, you might have a new vision or a new way of understanding your family and difficulties that your ancestors may have experienced. And the South Node is moving through the fourth house for the rest of 2024, ruled by Venus, which is with Jupiter in the 12th house. And so there can be some new understanding of your psychological nature based on your family of origin or based on your lineage. That is impinging on ways that you might realize you need to change, how you're relating to all of these areas of life in order to get to that North Node, which is in the 10th house. And then in 2025, the North Node moves into the Jupiter-ruled 9th house, where it becomes an even stronger influence while Jupiter's in your 12th. So you have a year ahead of profound opportunities for deep spiritual progress and growth, for understanding the bigger meaning, the higher sense of what life is all about, including your own sense of your purpose, the way that you want to live your life, by what standards. And with Pluto in the eighth house, you're going to be doing a lot of excavating. There can be some real issues around pushing and pulling in terms of money or in terms of shared values or shared resources in some way, shape, or form. And you would have had that Jupiter in the 11th house along with Uranus in the past year. And now Jupiter is much more stable in an unusual way because the Uranian energy is a little bit less intense. But now we've got this changeability, which is coming from the influence of Mercury. And currently Mercury is in your house of gains. And so there still is this theme of money that might be what you're tying up for based on the last couple of months, where Jupiter now in the 12th and with Venus in the 12th is showing you where you need to perhaps manage your money or manage your resources of all kinds, whatever whatever the gains were that were brought to you, including a following, let's say, if you're online, or a new network of friends, or a new resource that comes through different ways of working. All of that is tying into how you use that along with other people, how you can connect with other people. Now, especially this can be if you're working with people from abroad, or if you're working with people in a way that is deeply spiritual. It has to do with maybe human potential or human evolution, human development, personal development, spiritual development, because that Jupiter does rule the 9th house, and it rules your everyday house of work and health and routines through the Sagittarius 6th house. Now, this is for the sun, moon, and ascendant, but because the moon rules Cancer, it's important to check your moon. So if you do have a moon in Cancer, it's going to influence you very strongly. I'd say at least as strongly as your ascendant, because it is your natural ruler. So follow both and keep tracking for both, and because it will be deeply influential. The moon for Cancer is deeply felt. It's very personal, and the sun is to a certain extent as well. Again, this depends on your natal chart, but it's the moon is a very strong representation of who you are and how you operate in your life. And so keep this in mind. So whether it's your sun, moon, or ascendant, I'd say they have equal weight for a Cancer rising. So definitely a brilliant year for deep personal growth, deep spiritual growth, perhaps also encountering what you might call hidden talents around psychic or mystical awareness. The eighth house and the ninth house are both about astrology, counseling, supporting people, teaching people through these more either worldly things or high-minded ideas, high-minded principles, or mystical application of, age-old wisdom traditions, occult traditions, and so on. Eighth, ninth house are very much related to astrology as well, and the 12th house is ruled by Mercury, which is the planet of astrology. That Mercury is the one who translates the heavens to the human experience, and so that's the energy of Hermes in the original mythology. It's known as the psychopomp. Mercury pulls the heavens down to Earth. It's the bridge, let's say, between the human psyche and the cosmic psyche. And this is very, very strong at this moment for Cancer, sun, moon, and rising. And of course, this pulls into your career or the way that you show up in the world through the North Node. And Mars is there pulling in quite a lot of dynamism. It has been there since July of 2023, and it will continue to be until 2020, mid-January 2025. And then when the North Node moves into that ninth house, I think that's when you're going to really see the results of all of the things that you've been encountering through 2024 in terms of the internal work, and how that might work out for you. Now, the ninth house is also about publishing. Mercury is also about writing and communicating. And then Jupiter in Gemini is also about teaching, and it will tie in all of those things: teaching, publishing, writing, communicating. And so your third house is also ruled by Mercury, Virgo, third house. And so it's a good time to be writing a book. That's what I'm using this time for. I have both my moon and rising sign in Cancer. I'm writing a book. I have to pull myself back a little bit from work, which is that 12th house of retreat, pulling yourself back to get this stuff done, so that it can actually then come out into the world, and most importantly, out of your head and into reality. And so if you do have either a book or a course or a program that you want to share, whether it be online or in material, like through a three-dimensional space of a classroom or a book, this is the year to start doing that. Then when Jupiter moves into your first house, that becomes a part of what you do and how you show up in the world, with the North Node then moving into your ninth house as well, of teaching and higher wisdom and publications, and all the other ninth house stuff, which can include astrology as well. So I think that's it for Cancer. I think I've covered it all. You really are pulling in quite a new vision for your future, as the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happened in your house of the future, your house of your vision for yourself. And this is very, very much what this year is about. It's recreating your future based on something that's profound, internal. Beware of any self-sabotage, again, because with Jupiter in the 12th, there can be a potential for daydreaming or drifting off and not really focusing when you should focus. So that Saturn will be a help. Saturn squaring Jupiter keeps you on track. What is my purpose? So whenever you feel you're dispersed or you're not really sure, go right back to the Saturn in the ninth house, ruled by that Jupiter, and say, wait a minute, what do I see my life for? What is my purpose? And how do I want to move forward in this lifetime? So that will help you immensely to get through all of the obstacles that you might be creating for yourself. So good luck with all of that, Cancer. I'll see you in the next video. And so Leo, this is Jupiter coming into your house of gains and friendships, and maybe money that you earn from something that you do. If you are working for yourself, especially, that will apply. And Jupiter itself just was with Uranus in your 10th house. So you have had an enormous amount of focus on your career, on your ambitions, over the past year, a lot of status perhaps that you may have gained or that you may have taken responsibility for. You may have required a lot more effort to put that, to get that responsibility in order. This is especially true for the ascendant, but because the sun rules you, Leo, of course, it's going to apply to the sun very, very strongly, and to a certain degree, the moon as well. The sun represents you, Leo, just as the ascendant does, but also it represents your sense of career and your life purpose. And then the moon is very much to do with how you feel and how you're intuiting, or how you think in terms of your psychological relationship to life. It can also relate to home. And so if you have a Leo moon, you can listen to that in terms of what might be changing for you around what home feels like or where you actually live. And so here we have your ruler, the sun, along with Venus, along with Jupiter, as it ingresses this house of gains. This is highly beneficial for you. It's a beautiful omen, let's say, in terms of the year ahead. It does bring in enormous good fortune. The sun actually at this time has quite a lot of power over Venus and Jupiter because they're so close. The sun is really taking up a lot of space. And so while the sun moves away from that, it's actually going to bring a little more benefit. So it'll take perhaps a couple of weeks before you start to feel that things are changing and kicking in for you. And then the sun will move into your 12th house. So you might be having to plot and plan behind the scenes, or go abroad and sort things out in terms of longer distance relationships, or relationships that take place behind the scenes, such as roles of counseling and this kind of thing. But when the sun then moves into your sign during the summertime, as it does every year, I think that's when you're going to really feel the quality of this end of May time really expanding for you, because it's been in your 10th house, Jupiter, from May of 2023 till May of 2024. And now you see the benefit of all of that. It just starts to expand in your experience. And so it's going to really bring you a lot of opportunities in networking, a lot of opportunities in terms of how you can reach out in community and get success from that, or get some kind of notoriety from that. So you will get benefit from friends. When Jupiter is in the 11th house, we tend to have good fortune that comes through friends, or from people who have they have our best wishes at heart. They want things to work for us, and so they can be actually materially successful friends, or they can just be people who really do care for us, and then they want the best. So you can in this year gain a number of great benefits through the networks that you have and the people that you know. And this can also show up in terms of online work. If you work in some way of using the internet, or through your website, or through social media, or you have a following of any kind, this can also improve that, can really grow your following and have you feel very much honored by many of the people that are supporting you in all these different ways. Your 10th house, of course, remains important because that's where this cycle of Jupiter-Uranus started, and Uranus continues to be there. So things are still going to be changing. Things are still going to be showing up in a way that are that may feel unreliable, or at least not permanent. And so you can experiment. Jupiter in Gemini is very good for experimentation. Experimenting with new ideas. That's also the 11th house. New visions for your future, new ways of living, new ways of showing up in terms of how you want to see your life. So be creative. Sometimes the fixed signs like Leo and Scorpio and Aquarius and Taurus can get a little stuck in their ways. And so this Jupiter in the 11th can really shake you out of any kind of feeling of being stuck. That's also really, really beneficial. The North Node continues to be in your 11th house, sorry, in your 9th house. And it's along, when the Jupiter moves into this 11th house, it's actually happening at the same time that Mars is really strong in your 9th house. And that's a fellow fire sign. So that's in trine to you. The 9th house is a house of good fortune, very supportive for you. And the other trinal sign to you is ruled by Jupiter, your 5th house, ruled by Jupiter in Sagittarius. So this is also going to bring in a number of different opportunities for you with regards to either business, if it's something to do with how you want to expand into your sense of purpose through commerce, or it can be around your new vision for your either education or your sense of what you're here for in a general sense, and really putting a lot of effort into that. And it might also have something to do with children. Jupiter anyway represents children. Mercury also represents children. Jupiter's like the aspect of children that has to do with their growth, their knowledge, their learning, and even pregnancy. And so Jupiter in the 11th is aspecting the 5th house by opposition, and can bring some benefits there. In the 5th house, I would need to see your chart to see if there are children on the horizon. You do have Pluto moving through your 7th, so relationships of all kinds are changing, not just your social relationships like the 11th house types, the networks and the casual friends and the people that you share ideas with, but also your really important relationships, and how you relate is changing with that Pluto going through the 7th. So you're really in a period of time where the next 20 years are going to be very, very different, because you have to personally change as your relationships are changing with that Pluto there in the 7th house, but it's trining Jupiter at the time of this ingress. And so that's bringing you some real good fortune, some real upliftment, and a real sense of advantage, a real sense of something beautiful and harmonious happening at the time of that ingress. And so you also have Saturn, which is ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter also rules your 8th house as well as the 5th house. And Saturn is in there. And that can be issues around relationship that have to do with intimacy or shared resources. So there may be something that needs to be sorted out. If you do have issues in marriage, there will be some pressure there. There will be some need for change, a need for adaptation, to put yourself on firmer ground, because Saturn rules also your 7th house as well, but it's Jupiter ruling the Saturn in the 8th. That is extremely important right now throughout the year ahead, until February 2026, while Saturn is still there in your 8th house. And so there will be a square coming from your house of the future, and what you see for yourself, and how you might want to sort of expand into your life, and the gains that you might get from whatever you do. And it's squaring the 8th house. So there may be some obstacle in the 8th house, meaning your shared resources or issue around intimacy or marriage, that actually puts a brake on it, kind of slows you down, or prevents some kind of expansion into what you want. And so that's really going to be asking you to look at those details, look at things that are coming from unexpected obstacles that might come from other people, that might come from a need for you to take care of things behind the scenes that might have to do with family or family issues, or your family secrets and trauma that can be represented also by that 8th house. And especially with Saturn going through the 8th, it's a time to really deeply understand that. That's still perhaps in operation for you. But Jupiter in the 11th, nonetheless, is really optimistic. It's really helpful, very future forward. And so keep it real by clearing out the unconscious spaces, or anything that might be considered sort of shadow energy around relationships, or around how you share things with other people. And then you'll get that future that you're looking for. You'll really be able to work your way into that future. This is an excellent opportunity to work as a counselor, for example. If you're doing that kind of work as a counselor, or some kind of guide, or some kind of teacher, especially if you do social work, or if you work in a way that really supports people collectively, or if you work in politics, legal issues, anything to do with psychological things, psychotherapy, this kind of thing. It's a really, really good time for all of those things as well. So Leo, I think you're really going to enjoy this year ahead. It's a very, very supportive year. It really does bring in a lot of beautiful opportunities for you. So make the most of that, and I'll see you in the next video. And so Virgo, this is your turn now to shine in terms of your career, and in terms of how you stand out in the world, where you're really, you're going to have a lot of interest in terms of your career success and your ambitions. Now, again, I want to emphasize that this is for sun, moon, and rising sign. So especially the ascendant or the rising sign will be impacted this way. The sun does represent career, and so it will very strongly impact your career, both based on Virgo sun or Virgo rising sun, and to a lesser degree the moon, which represents more your internal relationship to life and how you're feeling about things. And so that this is an opportunity for you to work towards your career goals or towards your social goals, whatever social status goals you might have, including marriage, for example, or establishing a family, for example. This is a really big opportunity to change, because Jupiter is ruled by your chart ruler or your ascendant ruler, Mercury, and Mercury is in your ninth house, which is super favorable. At the time of the ingress, Mercury is moving through this house of good fortune and luck and the future, your sense of your purpose. And soon it will be moving into your 10th house, where it's really comfortable ruling Jupiter. And so Jupiter will be there for a year. It's not like you have to figure all this out at the very beginning, but as you progress through the 10th house, Jupiter will bring you opportunities that you will need to take advantage of in a way that can be extremely supportive towards expanding into your career. It's very good for people who work in terms of either teaching capacity, guidance, counseling, anything to do with the law, anything to do with management. The 10th house is about people who organize stuff, which is right up your alley, Virgo. It's people who need to manage people, and this is when Jupiter is in Gemini. It's absolutely brilliant, because Jupiter in Gemini is a good people person, and it's in a trine to Pluto, which is in your 6th house, which represents your everyday work, your work environment, and also colleagues and employees. And so there's a real boost here that's coming right off the bat. This is especially in early June, but really starting right away, as Jupiter and Venus and the Sun all move into your 10th house and really highlight that. So I'd say this is a year where you're going to find quite a lot of social progress, a big opportunity for changing your role in society. Now, the 10th house, if you're not actively working, if this is not about paid employment, you can think of it as your vocation in life, what let's say what calls you out the door, what the way you engage in life outside of your front door. And so this is anyway going to pull in quite a lot of interaction, a lot of social contribution, and it can be something to do also with leading. If you do have an idea, for example, around a social program, or contributing to a social issue, like there are so many today, this could be one of them. And Jupiter, of course, rules your 7th house of relationship, and it rules your 4th house of home. And so this could also be that your changing status has to do with getting some kind of connection in either direction, because this can go both ways. And Jupiter is not only about bringing in good things, it brings in what is good for you. And so there may be some issue around relationships where you haven't been in one and suddenly you have an opportunity to be in one, but they might live in a different country, because we're talking about, Saturn in Pisces squaring Jupiter in the 10th house, or you're too busy to have a relationship, but this person is right there. You got to sort that out, because this is an opportunity to have a lasting relationship that really could work for you. And especially as that also governs your home, Jupiter governs your 4th house of home and property. You might be also in a position where you're changing home, moving, or wanting that based on how you're connecting through a relationship, or some kind of investment that might be potential. Now, if you're not having any success in 2024 in terms of the relationships, in 2025, you've got the North Node moving into the 7th house, also ruled by Jupiter, even magnifying those chances of some new starts in relationship while Jupiter is in your 10th house. This is a very strong indication of marriage, for example, or a new way of showing up in a harmonious new relationship of some kind, especially intimate relationships and also business partners. Either way, it's bringing you benefit out in your worldly life and also in your domestic life. So think about these things as you go through the year. Don't overdo the work, because you're then missing out potentially on the chance to connect individually or connect intimately with somebody Chiron has been going through your house of intimacy. And so it's also healing all the way through till 2026. It's healing your, or maybe it's 2027, healing your notion of intimacy and how you connect with people, how you maybe need to develop a certain amount of confidence or trust again, or for once in your intimate relationships. And so this is part of the ongoing background because Chiron has been there for quite some time. That's where we've had a lot of these eclipses. And so that could be an opportunity when you meet somebody new to really overcome this potential for self-sabotage in the area of intimacy and how you might connect with others or how you might share resources with others. So Pluto going through your sixth house at the same time is going to get a nice boost because it does actually give you an opportunity to work really hard, to do a lot of work. You do want to be careful of burnout because with Jupiter in the 10th, you're already a Mercury ruled sign, and you also can tend to anxiety and overwork. And so you definitely want to every now and then smell the roses. You do have Saturn ruling your fifth house in Capricorn fifth house, which can have you forgetting at times that life can be fun. Life can just be fun. You can just relax and have fun. And so Jupiter in the 10th, ruling the 7th, go find people who enjoy life and hang out with people who like a good life and just have fun without guilt. The fifth house, both the fifth and sixth house ruled by Saturn can have you feeling a little bit guilty when you're sitting with your feet up, but do it anyway. And let's say feel the guilt and do it anyway. And so yeah, so that's Jupiter in your 10th. For you Virgos, I do think this is going to be a brilliant year. It's bringing in the aspirations of the ninth house, what you thought your vision would be based on that new conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus. So much energy that it's pulling in there into your 10th house. So don't forget what you understood. Don't forget that new insight that you got in terms of your higher purpose or your sense of what am I here for? What is my dharma? What do I know? What do I believe in? And pull it into your 10th house, and you will then get really the best out of this transit. So yeah, best wishes for you Virgos, and I'll see you in the next video. And so Libra, this is actually really lovely as well because the ninth house is a very, very lucky house. And when you have Jupiter in the ninth house, you do have also a really broadened vision for your life. And it's trining you. It's another air sign, so it's trining your first house. And we've also got Pluto moving into the fifth house of how you show up, how you are manifesting yourself, and through what basis of creativity or your way of self-expressing in the fifth house. That's trining the ninth house where we find Jupiter. So lots and lots of dynamic energy that feels comfortable for you. It feels familiar to you, which will also be a boost after, let's face it, quite a slog of having the North Node through Mars ruled Aries in your house of relationship, where we've had all these eclipses, and you still are having a couple of more eclipses going through October of 2024 and March of 2025. So hang in there. But things are shifting because of that Jupiter. You have a sense of optimism now, where the last year has been very much about the eighth house, where you were probably investigating quite a lot about what is hidden or what needed to be understood psychologically or in terms of how you connect intimately with people. There would have been quite a lot of focus on intimate relations. This can also have to do with the money that you earn if you're working for yourself, for example, money that you earn from clients, or how you earn money from a business enterprise, how your spouse earns money. So there may have been some more coming in, or maybe you inherited money. And now with Jupiter in the ninth, you're thinking, well, what do we do with this? What's my vision for using that, whatever I gained from the eighth house? The eighth house can also have to do with more challenging aspects of life, like deep transformation that comes from loss, that can come from death, that can come from the beginning or the ending of a relationship. We have to transform ourselves, whether we're entering into a relationship or whether we're leaving a relationship, whether that's permanent or temporary. And so there would have been quite a lot of processing for you in the last year. And now this feels like a new vision for yourself. So this is now you coming into a completely new place. And the Jupiter is ruling your sixth house. It also rules your third house of friends, which is also about goals and how you apply your aims and goals in the short run, how you connect with people in the everyday world. And Saturn in the sixth house connects with your everyday work environment and your everyday lifestyle, your everyday the stuff you have to do, the schlepping that you have to do, the hard work that you have to do. It's good to have Saturn there. It's good to have the malefics in the sixth house. And it's ruled by Jupiter. And so that means that you also have a sense of why you have to overcome these things, why you are doing what you're doing. It gives you a feeling of, okay, I can manage this now. It's what may have felt overwhelming, especially with Jupiter in the eighth house, becomes a little bit more, you see a sense of purpose, and you see a greater sense of, let's say, drive, because of the square tension that actually makes you work hard, because Jupiter is ruling your sixth house. And so even if it's a square, it's pulling in a lot of dynamism and energy from the ninth house of good fortune and a higher vision for yourself. What do you believe? What is your driving motto? Let's say what is the thing that you want to achieve in this lifetime? Now you're putting it into that sixth house where Saturn says, okay, let's make this real. Let's give it legs. And then, of course, Venus is your ruler, and she's with Jupiter and the Sun at this time. She's the ruler of Libra, ruler of the South Node, that's changing you, showing you how you can be different in 2024. And Venus is also part of this story. So it's kind of like saying you are part of this story, pulling yourself up there into a new vision for yourself. This can have something to do with studies or a thing that you might want to investigate, whether it be like a spiritual belief or a philosophical belief, or just simply a higher sense of what your life is all about, where you might have felt like the day-to-day slog was kind of ho-hum and it wasn't really working for you. And now you think, no, now I know why I want to do this thing. And that just energizes you in itself. Now, the ninth house is also the house of father. It's the house of religion and spirituality. And so you might also get some real boost either through your father or through father-like figures. The Jupiter is known as the guru, the teacher and a spiritual guide. And so Jupiter in the ninth house is really, really beneficial. Jupiter loves being in the ninth house. The Sun also, as it's there, loves being in the ninth house. And so it's bringing you a really good blessing as an omen going forward in this cycle that says you can get good counsel, you can get good advice, you can find good teachers, you can find people that you can lean on and live, you work with them or learn from them, and get great advice from them. Also because we've got Mercury that's ruling that ninth house in the eighth house, that's also a way of getting some support from behind the scenes. If you are into astrology, which I'm guessing you are, if you're here, if you are thinking of becoming an astrologer, this is also really nice energy for that, because Saturn is there in your house of every day saying, work harder and you can do this thing. And what is the thing? Well, it's what Jupiter is bringing into your ninth house, which represents astrology. And the ruler of that Jupiter, Mercury, is in the eighth house, which is all about the occult and the mystical, sort of magical side of astrology wisdom. And equally, we have Pluto moving into your fifth house, which is the house of entrepreneurship. And so you can say that maybe now you can see yourself working for yourself and working through something like astrology, or maybe it's tarot or something like that, or some other kind of mystical or spiritual type of work. Equally, Jupiter rules your third house of commerce and business and so on. And so you can see how this can play into the third house transactional quality as well as teaching, and how you might work. Obviously, if we're working like an astrologer, we're doing some kind of teaching as well. It's not just counseling, but it's also showing up in a way to teach somebody something about themselves. And Jupiter in Gemini does that really, really well. So I think that's it for you, Libra. That's quite a good thing to have on the agenda. It's a really lucky place. So enjoy this year to come. I think you're going to have a good one. And I'll see you in the next video. And Scorpio, we've got Jupiter moving into the house of all the things that nobody wants to look at. But Scorpio, you're up for it. The eighth house really resonates with Scorpio. And so it's the place where we can go deep into what is the mystery of life? What are the secrets? What are the things that nobody else wants to look at? You've just had a resurrection of sorts in your relationship house where Jupiter met up with Uranus. And especially if you are a Scorpio rising, this would have been extremely potent. You would have felt that very strongly. But if you're a Scorpio sun, also, and potentially also with regards to business partners, for example, or if this was something to do with igniting a new life passion in terms of how you see yourself. If it's your moon, perhaps a little bit less, but it's still going to be influential. It's an aspect of yourself, of course, more internal, more in terms of your psychological or emotional self. But nonetheless, a very, very important new development in your seventh house. Now Jupiter is moving from the seventh into your eighth house and pulling in all of those new connections, whether it be relations of intimate types like friendships or life partners or business partners, and you're getting the benefit out of that now. The eighth house is also where you might find that your spouse gets a lot of benefits if you're married, or you get the benefit of the marriage in other ways. That can be through what you gain through marriage, or what you gain through even inheritance. So its potential is that that there's somebody who's passing, and that you gain through somebody else's loss, which is essentially the meaning of the eighth house. It's also personal transformation or psychological transformation. And since Pluto is going through your fourth house now for 20 years, Scorpio, brace yourself. It is your modern ruler, if you want to think of it that. I tend to use the traditional one, which is Mars, currently in your sixth house. This is this connection between your fourth house of your lineage, but also your psychological and emotional center or foundation, if you like, and your eighth house, where we see things that are hidden or aspects that are secretive, not really clear, aspects that can provoke transformation or crisis even. We can see that this is an opportunity for you to really, really grow, become really familiar with the inside out. You do have the South Node also in the 12th house at the same time. And these are places of what are known as moksha liberation. These are the houses of liberation that frees you from worldly attachments. It frees you from the things that are obstacles to your genuine expansion and success, your genuine spiritual awakening. And especially with the South Node or Ketu in the 12th house, this is a particularly spiritual placement. It's a really wonderful place where you really get used to this feeling of letting go and shedding and moving on. And it's a kind of a theme anyway for Scorpio, dealing with the stuff that is like the nitty gritty, the challenging stuff of life. Don't get too stuck on it though. This is really important because the Scorpio fixed energy can be very stubborn. It's really helpful if you lighten up and you allow that Jupiter through the eighth house to bring you counselors and guides and wisdom, coming perhaps even through yourself, through what you didn't realize you already knew, or coming through wisdom traditions, the mystery school type traditions, which Scorpio resonates so strongly with. Bring it all in to use it as compost and work on yourself, because this is where you'll get a lot of transformation. If this is in a worldly way, you're looking through your house and home property. This can be about changing where you live. It depends a little bit more on the natal chart, and especially where the IC shows up, or how this might affect your moon. If it's a Scorpio moon, this might be even more so about where you live. And then, so Pluto going through the fourth can be about property ownership, or the buying and selling of property. And that's, again, for 20 years. It's not that you're going to be buying and selling property for 20 years, unless you become a real estate agent. It's entirely possible, but it's not necessarily what has to happen. But keep in mind that as Saturn is in your fifth house as well, there may be some issues around children, and maybe that's part of this story between the fourth house where Pluto is and the eighth house where Jupiter is, where you need to pull in kind of all hands on deck to sort out issues with children, or having to deal with issues of intimacy and love, new love connection, or a stagnating love connection, or some way of harnessing love in a romantic way, especially as that Jupiter and Uranus conjunction happened there in your seventh house. And certainly the opportunity is strong. Again, I would need to see your natal chart to see how that all pans out for you. But this can certainly impinge on issues around family and maybe things that you need to deal with around family, because Jupiter also rules your second house of family. It's also a house of income and earnings. And when Jupiter is in the eighth house, you might be earning less. There may be stuff that's coming more from other people. You're receiving more other organizations or other people that's coming to you, as opposed to money that you are specifically earning. If you are trying to have children and things are not working out, it may be that it's better for you in 2025. Again, I'm just saying this in a general way because I need to see your natal chart to find that. But Jupiter does rule your fifth house of children, and the North Node will be moving in there in January 2025. So that brings a lot more awareness and effort in that area, a lot more attention in that part of your chart. For the moment, the North Node is in the sixth house along with Mars and Chiron. And so it does feel like there is a certain amount of grind. There is a certain amount of attention that is required on your health as well. This might be mental health, especially as that Pluto's in the fourth house and Jupiter going into the eighth. It can be that you need to sort out some issue that may have felt heavy. There may be some issue of inflammation or depression that you're grappling with. Mars is your natal ruler, and it's in the sixth house. It rules your sixth house, and it's been with the North Node, so it's just about to approach Chiron. So there can be a moment right now as Jupiter is moving in the next couple of weeks. You can really turn the page and find a healing breakthrough if there is something that has been kind of hanging over you, and that can be something that you can overcome. Remember that the purpose of that energy of Scorpio is the Phoenix rising. It's overcoming and recognizing, you know what, this world is not what we think it is. It's so much more. And with Jupiter going through the eighth, you will really find that philosophy taking hold, and you really start to understand how profound personal transformation can be. Especially when you have the right guidance, and Jupiter going through the eighth and then later on the ninth house will help you with all of that. So I do wish you all the best, Scorpio, whether it's sun, moon, or rising, and I will see you in the next video. And Sagittarius, your ruler is moving into your opposite sign. And so this will affect your seventh house of relationships. This is often people are like, oh, yeah, I'm going to get married. And then after a year of Jupiter in the seventh house, they're like, wait, what? And the problem is that Jupiter is going to bring you what you need in relationship. It's going to bring you what you need. And remember that Jupiter is you. It kind of is like your ambassador going through the chart because it's ruling Sagittarius, sun, moon, or rising. Especially the rising sign, you have this in opposition in the seventh house, but especially for the sun, it's going to be affecting business partnerships, and for the moon, it's your sense of how you relate to life, and perhaps also with regards to your mother or your role as a mother or your home, the more intimate aspects of life through psychological or emotional nature in the Sagittarius moon. Now, Gemini is the opposite. We're going to say anyway, it's about relationship one way or another, however you slice it. And let's face it, with Sagittarius rising, the reason you have a bit of a reputation as a bit of a runaround is because Gemini is on your seventh house. And so you're always kind of looking, the grass always seems a little greener on the other side of the fence. There's always a little bit of an eye out for who's over there. And that might increase now with Jupiter going through the seventh house. It doesn't mean you haven't found the right one and that can't turn into a beautiful relationship, but that can't be your whole new reality going forward. It again depends on your natal chart. It depends on the quality of your natal Jupiter. And, you know, let's face it, the timing, your age, all of these things factor in. It's a much bigger question than just one transit. So with Jupiter going through the seventh house, nonetheless, you're going to get great benefit from other people, a real increase in terms of a focus on friendships of importance or relationships that bring you some kind of business connection, or again, a personal connection. Jupiter rules your fourth house of home, as well as your first house of self. And so this will, whatever type of relationship you're pulling in, it will affect your house and home. And of course, it affects you personally. That's part of the story of the seventh house rather. So these are what are called quadrant houses for first, fourth, seventh, and 10th. And so you're being affected in the most important aspects of your life, in the very important areas of life that are yourself, as you feel about yourself, how you show up, and then where do you live, how do you live, are you comfortable, are you feeling secure, and then in terms of the relationships, and then in terms of how all of that shows up in society, how all of that creates your social status or your career or your sense of purpose out in the world. And so Jupiter here for a year is bringing you a lot of dynamism that you can really harness because it is your ruler. And even if it's in its so-called detriment, it does still bring really, really useful things. And you do have Saturn in the fourth house, still ruled by that Jupiter. And so it can be very grounding for Sagittarius, which can often struggle with what is grounding. So it can at times feel like a bit of a burden. You would have had Jupiter in the sixth house for the last year, is where a lot of the new cycles happened just before Jupiter moved into the seventh, and most especially Jupiter with Uranus. And so those new cycles are creating a vision for how do I want to live my life day to day? What is my lifestyle? How do I feel about my life? This can involve your health as well. Any issues of health have been somehow a focus of the last year. And as Jupiter moves on into the seventh house, that becomes less and less of a focus. It's hopefully something that you learned a lot about and you were able to move on from. With the fourth house now, where Saturn is, there can be this feeling of being stuck and feeling heavy. And that actually is going to be supported by Jupiter moving into your seventh. So as opposed to being in the sixth, where it feels like there's just such a lot to do, so busy in terms of your everyday life, but the stuff that you don't like to do, like the contracts and the obligations and working with client, your colleagues or working with employees and all the schlepping that you have to do every day to make your day-to-day life work. Now it's much more of a focus on how you connect with other people. And you're very social anyway, so you love that. You really do love connecting with people, and this just brings a lot of opportunities. As I said before, Jupiter going through the seventh doesn't mean it's all going to be sunshine and roses in relationship or in terms of having a new relationship. It means that you will have the relationship that you need to have in this lifetime. So the more that you're conscious about that, using this energy consciously, establish that foundation for your life using that Saturn that's going through the fourth house. Find out what it is that you need to feel secure emotionally, psychologically, materially, and Jupiter will help you find the people that you need to do that with. It's also in a trine. Jupiter is trining Pluto, which is in your third house of your local environment, your community, the neighborhood specifically, or your siblings and your extended family. And so that can also contribute to this, where you're feeling like, wow, new connections coming through this new way of showing up in my local environment. This can also be with reference to educational enterprises, where the third house can represent learning new skills, practical learning, teaching even. Jupiter, of course, is in Gemini representing teaching. Jupiter is a teaching quality in and of itself. And then Sagittarius, especially Sun and Rising, is a very good teacher. So that would be kind of a natural gift that you have. You don't have to necessarily earn your living through doing that, but that's one of the qualities that can bring out in you. And the Pluto going through the third house is going to have a lot to do with integrity around your speech and how you engage with people. What is true with a capital T, true. So in that genuine sort of Sagittarian way of understanding the higher wisdom, the higher truth of life. And Jupiter in a trine to Pluto can really bring you a sense of what is true for you in relationship. We're no longer going to compromise, where I no longer want to just kind of flit around and be like this kind of social butterfly, but I really want to invest perhaps with sincerity in a relationship. And that would bring you fantastic results. Sagittarius, you will definitely this year be able to settle into something that brings you lasting benefit, because it's going to be squaring Saturn in the root of your chart, really in the place that brings you a sense of depth and connection to what you need to feel stable. And that's a long time quest for Sagittarius, is a feeling of stability. If there is any issue around depression, if there was something to do with health issue or something that makes you feel that your home life is really burdensome, or there's some challenge there around the home life, the Jupiter going through the seventh house will bring you counselors and healers and guides and the right people. Even if it's a legal issue, for example, you might need a good lawyer, and Jupiter will bring you that person. Now you've got Jupiter, Venus, and the Sun ruling your ninth house, all in the seventh house. The Venus ruling your sixth house of challenges. And so you're finding people you can work with to sort out these challenges. So whatever they were, whatever they might be, you're going to get a lot of support to work your way through it. It's going to come through other people. It's going to come through how you connect in the right way with the right people, let's say. So your fifth house is still a point of focus that's trining you. So it's with the North Node in your fifth house and Mars there ruling it at the moment of the ingress. Chiron has been perhaps showing you where you're not fully showing up honestly, in the way that you need to, where you might feel a little shy. Believe it or not, Sagittarius rising can still feel shy, Sagittarius sun as well. And where you might be, again, not really being authentically yourself, Chiron is working with that energy and trying to help you through that. And Pluto will be like, dude, you've got to be honest about this. You've got to be real. You've got to get down to the root of it. And you have to speak with integrity and no more of this kind of speaking out of both sides of your mouth kind of thing. And this is where you're going to get the benefit also out of that Pluto in the third, potentially transforming also relationships with siblings or cousins or your extended family, or having to transform through them. So I think that's it for you, Sag. You definitely have some new goals that you've been working on anyway, all through 2024. You're letting go of an old idea that you had about your future or about your sense of what you were aiming for. New goals are coming in here. And I think with the new goals, you're getting new people to work with in terms of how to engage in those goals. Right off the bat, end of May, beginning of June is an opportunity to change and move in a new direction. So that's a really nice way of using this energy. And I wish you all the best. Capricorn, this is your sixth house. It's a place that you're very familiar with. It's about hard work and struggle and difficulty, and you're really good at that. However, I have to say that the new cycle of Jupiter and Uranus happened in your fifth house, which is children and fun and hobbies and enjoyment of life. And so I'm hoping that you brought in a new vision. That's where you might have found a new inspiration or a new vision for yourself through that fifth house, which is fortunate, which is fun, which is about love, how you express your love, how you experience love. And when you bring that new vision of, hey, you know what, life actually doesn't have to be horrible. Life doesn't have to be one damn thing after another and a lot of struggle. And you pull that into your sixth house so you can be busy with a sense of joy. And now you've got this Jupiter plus Venus along with the Sun for your sixth house. And this is especially true for a Capricorn rising, but definitely for the Sun as well. And the Moon will also apply. This is going to be an opportunity to really enjoy how you engage with your everyday life. Have a vision for what you consider to be your lifestyle. What is it that you want in your life? How do you want to show up in your day-to-day life? It's very, very helpful if you do have any health issues at all, that you will be able to work through them, but you want to catch them. They may be issues that are lifestyle related. So be careful, because you do have Jupiter ruling your 12th house of hidden enemies, and you can be your own worst enemy in terms of self-indulgence. That could be around issues of escapism or alcoholism or drug abuse or things that or overeating or whatever. I'm just giving examples. It's not necessarily each case. It's just to say that that potential is there for wishful thinking. Yes, indeed, even Capricorns dream of a better future. And so with Jupiter in the sixth house, you really have an opportunity to recognize that it's a place to turn around and have a better future from a place of a better day-to-day routine. And that includes not overworking. It includes being a good friend to yourself. Gemini represents friends. And so being a friend to yourself. If you do work with colleagues and employees, you're going to have a lot on your hands. You will have good relations with those people. You'll have a busy time, but it will be joyful. It can be really beneficial. There may be some obstacles, and again, it depends on your natal chart, but since Jupiter itself is considered in its detriment in Gemini, it's not going to be easy, full-flowing, like it would be, for example, if that were Sagittarius, but it's still really helpful. And you do like to keep yourself busy, to keep yourself off the streets and out of trouble. And you're going to get it really full on in the year that Jupiter goes through the sixth house. It can also mean, let's face it, that Jupiter is attracting or bringing in, or there is some kind of way of having to deal with more challenges, more obstacles, more difficulties, and that might have something to do with your extended family or a sibling or your neighbors, some issue around the neighborhood. Or around even your property, because the North Node is in your fourth house. And so you might even have to be doing more for a sibling or for a cousin or for some uncle or something like that, because Jupiter is ruling your third house where Saturn is as well. So there is something here that is tying you to all of those factors, tying you to your everyday sort of goals, let's say, and to your everyday surroundings. And Saturn is important as your ascendant ruler. It would rule, of course, the sun or moon, but it's especially important as your ascendant ruler. Saturn also rules your second house of income. And so as it's ruled by Jupiter, that extra hard work that you're pulling in through the sixth house, and Saturn in the third house, perhaps redefining your goals or your sense of what I need to develop as skills, or how I might need to negotiate, especially if you're working in commercial enterprise, that's going to affect the Pluto in the second house. So there is an opportunity actually to bring in some real success, especially since you did have that Jupiter and Uranus in the fifth house, which is also a lucky house. It's a house of risk taking, but also a house of benefits from the risks that you take. And you've got Venus ruling that, so that's quite handy. But that's also feeding back into your second house, where Pluto is going in and saying, sort this out. You can bring a lot of energy and power into your house of income and what you earn, how you earn it. And then pulling that through to your everyday work, where Jupiter will be putting a lot of your attention for the next year. So the way that you work every day, the choice of how you work, the attitude that you bring, will all contribute to that, the Pluto there in the second house. Now, the second house also represents family. It's everything that supports you, and that's all transforming. So especially because we did see that Jupiter, all of those conjunctions in Taurus, especially the Jupiter-Uranus one in your fifth house, this could be about children, either coming in, new children, or moving out, or the relationship with your children changing, or their needs changing. And then, of course, that's going to affect your second house for the long run, as Pluto goes into the second house and changes the dynamic there with family. Especially as the North Node is also in the fourth house, I think family issues are really primordial at this time and throughout 2024. And Mars is there too. Mars is your exalted, Mars is exalted in Capricorn, and so it's an interesting planet to follow for Capricorn, whether it be sun, moon, or rising. So that's another factor that might involve family, lineage, property, kids, all those things. So definitely a year for expanding, but expand based on what you know brings you joy, Capricorn. So this is an opportunity for you to no longer, work so hard that you feel life is just one damn thing after another. It is a really important opportunity for you to change your perspective, because that Jupiter-Uranus cycle that begins in the fifth house of what brings me joy, how do I express happiness, how do I express myself creatively, what is love, all those beautiful aspects of the fifth house, that's going to last for 12 to 14 years, 12 years in the Jupiter cycle and 14 years in the Jupiter-Uranus cycle, which happens the next time in your house of relationship. So, right. I think that's it, Capricorn. That's your that's your homework for now. So the homework is to enjoy day by day, enjoy the present moment in whatever you're doing. And as you do that, you're just going to find that go climbing the mountain, everything works in good time to bring you success. So good luck. And Aquarius, this is a happy place. This is happening in your fifth house. And the fifth house is a lovely place to have Jupiter. Jupiter is very happy in the fifth house. The one thing to carry, to keep a bit of an eye on, is that Jupiter in the fifth can be quite indulgent. There, especially with Venus, there can be a certain amount of self-indulgence, but that's okay. You've had a bit of a hard ride with Saturn going through your first house, now Pluto going through your first house, so you can certainly enjoy a bit of indulgence with Jupiter trining your first house. It's also just had a renewal in your fourth house of your what makes you happy, or what you need to feel secure and safe and good about your life, whether that be emotionally or psychologically or materially. And as as Jupiter goes into your fifth house and brings that new feeling into how to express all of that, it's trining Pluto in your first house. So it's changing the way you're feeling about all these things. And in the meantime, as you're being changed through what Pluto is demanding of you in terms of changing, you're really feeling this boost. It's a very nice, supportive trine between your fifth and your first house. Very fortunate. It brings a feeling of grace. It brings a feeling of possibility. So this is an opportunity to be your true creative self, really explore that creativity over the next year in a very personal way, because it's going to reflect back on you with that Pluto changing you step by step in your first house. And as we've got Saturn going through your second house, Saturn is your ascendant ruler. And of course, it rules your sun and moon as well, Aquarius, but this is especially strongly indicated for the ascendant. And Saturn rules your second house, which is money, income, your resources, the stuff you've got, all the possessions that you have, the things that make you feel that they support your life. That can include your family. It can include all of those aspects of your physical self as well, meaning your body and the food that you eat as well. That's also being affected by Saturn, which is in turn being affected by Jupiter. And so Jupiter and your chart ruler, your ascendant ruler, are really pulling together in this really interesting way for you. You also have Jupiter ruling your 11th house of your future and your vision for life and the networks and friends that you spend time with. So a lot of this can also affect that. Indirectly, it's going to, whatever you're pulling into this practical way of showing up in your life, and this very creative way of showing up in your life, is going to change your vision for your life, or as your vision is changing, it's also feeding back into all of this as well. So that's quite support, really beneficial. The North Node is moving through your third house, and that house is where a lot of your everyday activity is taking place, where you have need to understand things better. It's a very dynamic place in terms of travel or connections, or how you see your work day. Now, between the third house where the North Node is and the fifth house where Jupiter is, we also have quite an opportunity, if you're interested in becoming an entrepreneur, or if you already are an entrepreneur, you have a great opportunity to start something long-lasting, something quite enterprising and supportive for you, especially here towards the end of May and beginning of June, and going into the middle of June particularly and onwards, just going to really work very well for you. So because, your ruler is in the house of money, so it puts you in a position of being really serious about your money, how you earn your money, and what that looks like, how you manage your money. And when Jupiter is in the fifth, it's a very good opportunity for creative enterprise as an entrepreneur, or inventing things. You could be inventing all kinds of things. It's Jupiter and Gemini in the fifth house. Especially as Mars is there with the North Node in the house that it rules, in the third house of commerce and how you engage with people. The fifth house is also a house of education. It's in the sense of students and what you already know from other lifetimes. And the third house is also an education house. It's a place of higher learning, and or rather everyday learning, practical skills, and and how you're developing skills that you might need for what you're doing. So this is also an opportunity for you to realize that you could develop some skills and put those skills to work, also potentially for earning something from your skills. Like imagine you're, say, an artist, or you are, I don't know, a singer or somebody who does something creative. And that Jupiter going into your fifth house really brings out some opportunities for you to express that creativity and to potentially benefit from it as well, because it's ruling the house of gains. The 11th house is the money that you earn from the thing that you do out in the world. And since Jupiter also rules your second house of income, in the fifth house, it's a really a wonderful opportunity to just show up as yourself with your skills, with your talent, with your creative expression, and also earn some money from it as well. The fifth house is also the house of love. It's a house of lovers, love in general, how you love. It's a house of children. And so there can also be a new relationship with children in every different kind of way. And how having children or not having children or trying to have children is impinging on your sense of your vision for your future. And of course, yourself, because we've got that Pluto in a trine to Jupiter. On issues around having children or not, I would need to see your natal chart. And this is always going to be the case. And so please, if you do want to know something more intimate like that, I would need to see the whole chart. Please don't ask me in the comments if you're going to have kids or if you're going to fall in love. It's not as easy as that. Jupiter brings us what we need. Jupiter brings us the benefits of the thing that we need to happen to grow in wisdom and abundance through this lifetime. So good luck with that, Aquarius, and I'll see you in the next video. In Pisces, of course, Jupiter rules your sign, and Jupiter is extremely important for you, and therefore a really important aspect of your transits for the next year, always, in fact, but especially because it's pulling Saturn in from your first house. You're changing quite dramatically. There's a new sense of what you're pulling out of your life and taking maybe more yourself more seriously, or taking your life more seriously, or needing to reorganize your life, or needing to reorganize yourself and taking more responsibility around yourself or around how you show up in the world, based on also now Jupiter moving into your fourth house of your area of security, what makes you feel secure, what makes you feel psychologically, emotionally, materially secure. And that's bringing something really beneficial for you. It's giving you opportunities around home. Now, fourth house, where we find Gemini for the Pisces, especially Pisces rising, to a certain extent, also Pisces moon, and then of course Pisces sun. That can show there's a certain amount of instability around home, that there's a little bit of a changeability, that there can be either a lot of moving or a changeability in terms of having a couple of properties, or exchanging, always being on the housing ladder kind of thing. And there's a certain amount of insecurity around that. Now with Jupiter there, it can actually increase that insecurity. This depends on where you are in your story. Pluto is moving through your 12th house of the unconscious, and also the areas of self-undoing, things that you might do that are not bringing you benefit. That can also represent the unseen things, like the mystical side of life, and the what you might call spiritual or otherworldly side of life. It can also be about ancestors, and the fourth house also represents your lineage and your family. And so there can be here a connection very deeply with your internal nature, your sense of your psychological or emotional nature, and what's coming through either ancestral stuff or through what you're picking up unconsciously, which of course for Pisces is always very strong. But in this case, it can be an opportunity for you to consciously develop that. Like Jupiter going through the fourth house is asking for that connection, asking for something to root you, ground you in your natural culture, in your native culture, in your lineage, in your family lineage, and pull it in through that 12th house of ancestors. The South Node is in your 8th house of your deeper psychological place and your unconscious. Similar to the 12th house, the eighth house is what's hidden from us, but it's in a way that is something we can generally understand or discover at some point. It is the place of family secrets or intimacy, or what we need to learn about sharing with other people. And Jupiter is trining that. And then it's with Venus, which is ruling that eighth house. So there's something that's being let go of there. Perhaps it's an over dependence on other people, or it's something that has to do with a way of being in deeper relationships. And now Jupiter is bringing you more of a sense of security and confidence coming through that grounding. If it is about physical property, it can bring you something that's an improvement on what you already have. This can be, let's say, especially as 2025 rolls in, I think when the North Node moves into your first house, it's much more likely. At this point, there's a lot of focus on family, on money with the North Node in your second house. Earned income, or rather the, your holdings, let's say the things that you possess in all different ways, but your family in general. The new beginnings that you had were in your third house, and that's kind of like short-term goals, but it's also around your neighborhood. So again, we tie in this theme of where do I live? How do I live where I live? Who's around me? And the third house is also your extended family. So there can be quite a lot here connecting you to through yourself, to your family and to your home. And you can think about that in the metaphysical sense of what is my home? What is my interior home or my spiritual home? As well as the actual material home, the physical place that you live, the house and home. And then this also pulls into your everyday life. So that the sixth house is ruled by Jupiter. Sorry, no, your sixth house, no, your 10th house. Yes, your career is ruled by Jupiter as well. And so that's pulling something into career. And so perhaps that new cycle of Jupiter from the third house was showing you where you have to work through new ways of communicating. Jupiter was with Uranus, but Jupiter and the Sun and Venus were all just there in your third house, just before Jupiter entered into your fourth. And so that can be very much about your goals, your short-term goals, skills that you need to develop, how you communicate things, how you connect artistically or creatively as well to what you do. It's a commercial house, so very good for business endeavors. It's good for working from home. Jupiter, your ruler in the fourth house, especially with Venus that rules the third house. With all of these particular planets right here, right now, this is an awesome time to start a home business of some kind. Or literally, becoming a real estate developer or a real estate agent, or I don't know, running like Airbnb or whatever. I don't know to what extent any of that applies to some of you, but it can be that as well, that you're actually making a living that has some connection to home itself. Or that you're buying a second home, like a summer home, weekend home, something like that. What else have we got? Yeah, so then the trine to Pluto is very supportive. So if you have been struggling a little bit, if you're finding things difficult, especially if Saturn goes through the first house and you have had Saturn in the 12th, it can feel like things have been heavy. There may have been this feeling of, wow, this is like lots and lots to grapple with. And not feeling necessarily supported by some of the things lately, last year or two. I think with the Pluto trine Jupiter, there's a real sense of your boost coming from the spirits, coming from spirit guides, coming from foreign lands. The 12th house does represent foreigners, foreign lands. And so that you can also think of that coming through to how you show up in the world. The more you go into your psychological, spiritual, family connected, cultural lineage, mystical lineage, the more you go into all of that, Pisces, the more you will succeed this year and into spring of 2025, because the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th are very, very strong right now as Saturn stabilizes you in your first house, ruled by Jupiter in the 4th. And then that pulls in the Jupiter ruled 10th house. So if you can find that way to tap into that more mystical, like kind of archetypal Piscean way of showing up, I think you'll really find your way. You'll find your way through a deeper transformation. that has to come one way or another, because Pluto is going through the 12th house. It has to transform you from the inside out with that Pluto in the 12th. Lots of churning from the unconscious, but also what you might consider to be the ancestors or the spiritual realm. And as it's trining the Jupiter in the 4th, you might be able to tie that right into your family lineage, or to knowledge that's coming from the land or from the people that you are, like from your people. Um, what else is that? I think that's about it, Pisces. I mean, it's pretty good. I do see this as very beneficial for you, because it's your ascendant ruler. It does, of course, rule your sun and moon as well. This is very, very strong for Pisces rising, but absolutely for the sun and moon as well. It just brings you a boost, because Jupiter is going to bring some feeling of activity, and at the same time stability into your 4th house. So lots and lots of activity there, potentially creating a need to move, or a desire to move, or a desire to expand what home means for you, in whatever way. So you're being affected in the most important parts of your life: your 1st house of self, your 4th house of your foundation and home, and your inner foundation, family, lineage, etc., and property, and then the 7th house of relationships, and the 10th house of career and vocation, and how you show up in the world. So a really big transit for Pisces with your ruler moving through the 4th. Yeah, wonderful. Bring the most of this to you, Pisces. It's your chance to shine in your own home, as it were, or in your inner home. And I wish you all the best with this. Take good care. Bye bye.